All right, let's talk underrated quarterbacks. I'm sure everyone thinks that their favorite quarterback should be on this list, but I can't pick everyone's quarterback to be underrated. Some guys are just properly rated, right? But here I am going with the 7 quarterbacks that the way I did this was I made my top 32 quarterback rankings list. I put that on the podcast. If you haven't checked that one out, Kyle and I go through our top quarterback rankings. But what I did was I also looked at a composite quarterback rankings. I compiled a bunch of other people's quarterback rankings and simply just compared notes. What do people view differently than what I view? And these were the guys that ended up making it higher on my list than on most people's lists. So yeah, let's just get into it. Starting off with number 7. Number 7 is Kirk Cousins, which, I had him a little bit higher than most people did. It wasn't like a crazy jump or anything like that, but I don't know. I've always kind of been higher on Cousins than most. I feel like Cousins is someone who's like a good quarterback. I think to me, it's probably fair to be more critical this season because he is coming off of an Achilles injury, it's scary. There's no getting around that. That is concerning. I don't know if it's concerning enough to draft a quarterback at number 8, but still, it's concerning, right? But I think he's a good quarterback. Again, people will use the game manager tag as this massive insult, but it's really effective, and he is a game manager at an incredibly high level. I think PFF had him graded as like the number 1 quarterback in football one year, and that's basically a game manager stat. So, well, yes, he might not give you the explosive stuff that some other quarterbacks might, and yes, usually paying him $45 million a year means you can't win a Super Bowl. He's still a very good quarterback, and we shouldn't I think that kind of just because he's more of a goofy personality, usually he doesn't get some of the love he deserves. And speaking of love, Jordan Love makes the list at number 6, another guy who I was surprised that I was higher on him than other people, because usually it's the other way around. Usually a guy like Jordan Love, who comes in, has an inconsistent first year, but ends the year strong, I am kind of the guy who is saying, let's pump the brakes a little bit, because we don't know. Yes, there was some really good stuff, but there is some projection. Is he an inconsistent player who happened to put some good games together towards the end of the season, or did he legitimately get better and is just a better player now? We don't know. But, man, he was really good towards the end of last season. And I think that, to put him, below a Kirk Cousins, like we see some people do, is just not fair for me personally. I think he's shown way too much positives, and the ceiling that he does have is really strong. So, yeah, he makes my list at 6. Number 5 is Drake May, who, again, looking at other people's lists, a lot of people had him, barely above the 32 spot on their rankings, or even not on the rankings at all, and having Jacoby Brissett be their projected starter, which listen, Jacoby Brissett's a good player, but I don't know. I feel like the criticism for Drake May has gone a little bit too far. People act like he's just this complete projection, like he's Anthony Richardson, which was just this complete physical freak. Hopefully we can teach him how to play the sport, essentially. And even that was a bit overblown with Richardson. But for Drake May, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of stuff he does really well and could be uniquely fit, I think, actually, to do a decent job for the New England Patriots right away. So he's a complete projection, and so it is fair to say, you can kind of put him in a wide range of spots on your projections list. But at the same time, I think he was often much on the low end of that area of where you could put him than the high end, which, I don't think is fully fair. So I put him at number 5 on my most underrated players. Obviously, I'm not saying he's better than Jordan Love or Kirk Cousins, just that I think that he's more underrated than those guys. Number 4, I went with Trevor Lawrence, who, again, it wasn't a massive jump that some people had and I had. I get it. I think some people feel a little burned by Trevor Lawrence, to be honest. He was a guy who was the dark horse MVP candidate, which, if you're ever a dark horse MVP candidate, it's the kiss of death. The dark horse MVP candidate never succeeds. They always end up playing poorly. It was Baker Mayfield with Cleveland. It was Jameis Winston that one year when they added Deshaun Jackson. It always happens year after year. So what are you gonna do? It wasn't his fault. But I thought did do a really good job of being a game manager at a high level. Really good arm talent that he showed off, can make stuff happen after a play breaks down. Did not play well after he got banged up. He just didn't, and that's a fair criticism, but I feel like people aren't even factoring in how hurt he was toward the end of the season last year. When you factor that in, he played all right. Like, I don't know. I think people are too hard on him. He's number 4 on my underrated list. Number 3 is Jaylen Herz, who, again, I have a little bit higher than a lot of other people do. He 8th on my list, where I think a lot of people, did not have him in the top 10, which, like, I don't know. It's weird because I feel like last year, no one gave him the credit that I thought he deserved because people said, well, you had good receivers. That was a lot of what was going on, was throwing down the field to A.J. Brown. Hey, if I could throw it down the field to A.J. Brown, I'd do all right, which, first off, no, you wouldn't. But secondly, with Jaylen Herz, I thought he did a lot more than that. I think that was a simplistic way of looking at how good his year was 2 years ago. Then last year, his receivers got hurt. There was no A.J. Brown in the playoffs, and he really didn't, in that Tampa Bay game, I was there in the stands at that playoff game, and, like, he did not have anywhere to go with the football on most of these plays. It's really hard to criticize him, like, too much for that game, I think. I don't think he did that poorly. He did what he could. If guys aren't getting open, nothing you can do. So it's weird how he got discredited because his receivers were too good, but then once his receivers weren't as good and the offense didn't work as well, nobody's willing to say, well, nobody's willing to bring that up, I feel like. And I'm saying nobody. Plenty of people are. But it's not getting talked about as much as I think it should have, so I think he's a bit underrated. Number 2 is Aaron Rodgers, who, listen, I totally understand the impulse to be lower on Aaron Rodgers due to the fact that he is getting up there in age. 2 years ago wasn't his best season, and then last year he had an Achilles injury. There also is the other factor with Rodgers of, like, did he rush back from injury? We don't know. There was that weirdness going on. So did he potentially stress that and lose even more mobility and even more strength in the that tendon than you would like, which could cause even more of a setback, and maybe you do typically lose power when you have an Achilles injury. You just do. Did that happen with Rodgers? We hope not, but there is that there are those very fair and valid concerns. The guy also was, prior to his down season, won back-to-back MVPs, and he has had a large history of being a very incredible player for a long time. The ceiling of Rodgers is so high that not even putting him in the top 10, in my opinion, is a little silly at this point. And I always wonder, like, how much of it comes down to his personality. Sometimes when I see him really low on certain lists, I'm like, listen, I don't like Aaron Rodgers either, all right? I can acknowledge he's an incredible football player. I feel like you should be able to compartmentalize both of those two things. I think he's really underrated. I have him at number 2 on my underrated list. But number 1, I'm going Joe Burrow. Everyone forgot about Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was kind of the consensus number 2 quarterback. He gets injured, which that's his one knock, is he gets injured too often. That he has to protect himself better. That's a totally fair and valid criticism. But other than that, he gets hurt, and now he's like number 4 on a bunch of lists. And Lamar and Allen have jumped him, and part of that is Lamar won a second MVP. Josh Allen, I thought, deserved the MVP last year. Like, a lot of really good, stuff with those two players. But at the same time, it's like, man, I really think Joe Burrow's an underrated player. Joe Burrow, like, all of his efficiency stats and things like that are incredible. I think he's still the second best quarterback in football. I do. Mahomes is obviously number 1, but I don't know. I'm going with Burrow here. He is my most underrated quarterback in football, which is kind of silly because obviously he's still rated very highly, but I think he should be rated even higher. So yeah, those are my thoughts. These are the 7 most underrated quarterbacks. Which one do you think I'm crazy about? Which one is properly rated? Which one is overrated? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.